Welcome to the Alchemy Experience podcast, where transformation isn't just talked about, it's lived. I'm Erin, and around here, we're turning breakdowns into breakthroughs, pain into power, and survival into serious thriving. Whether I'm flying solo or vibing with a badass guest, we dive into all the things on health, creating beautiful relationships, and building wealth. We're keeping it real, raw, and ridiculously empowering. It gets a little juicy, a little bit wild, and super inspiring. This isn't just another podcast, it's your permission slip to evolve loud, proud, and on purpose. Let's go light the world on fire. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Alchemy Experience podcast. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Isaac Mashman. He's a guru in personal branding, a speaker, and a two-time author, most recently putting out his brand new book, Personal Branding, a Manifesto on Fame and Influence. It's about the philosophy of personal branding. In this episode, we get pretty deep in the psychological behavior and mindset behind branding for your business, but more importantly, who you want to be as your own walking billboard. Isaac is a powerhouse in the consulting arena on how to own and grow your business by tapping into your personal brand. He certainly has helped me significantly as I've been in a season myself of reinvention. Listen up because you don't want to miss these mic drop moments. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Alchemy Experience podcast. I have Isaac with me today, and I'm super excited to have you on the show because here on the Alchemy Experience, we like to share people's stories, and we have all different walks of life and folks coming in promoting the things and the babies that they're building and putting out into the world. And you have something really unique that has just come out, and I'm inspired by it and I'm intrigued by it, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. So I want you to share all about that with my peeps. But before I have you introduce yourself, I'm just going to share that I met Isaac through a group that I am involved with, Jesse Cruz. I feel like I'm dropping his name so much lately, Desiree and Jesse, and through his speaker group. And you came in and gave like a mic drop presentation on all the goods that have gone into this book. So you can give us a snippet today and tap into my viewers and the folks that pop on and listen to the show about who you are, where you're from, how this journey landed you to write this remarkable book, and kind of what you want to share with the world today.
Yeah, absolutely, Aaron. And thank you again for the invitation to be on your show. And I'm really excited because I'll be doing a lot of podcasts essentially every single week for the next like 36 months. And so
Oh,
this is a good way to get the ball rolling coming from a little bit of a hiatus. I was back home in Jacksonville, Florida when I gave that presentation, and I was trying to make the best out of it. And I was like, all right, I'm not in my normal setup. I don't have the microphone. I don't have everything, but we're going to roll with it. And I'm just glad that, all the people that were in the group, there were probably a dozen of you guys, that there was value, and I'm grateful for the relationship now. And so what you're talking about and what you're hinting at is the second edition of my book, which I have, if you're watching on video, right behind me, called Personal Branding, a Manifesto on Fame and Influence. And this is the second edition. I have the small, minuscule, baby first edition to the left, which I don't want to talk down on it too much. I published this in 2021. It was my first softball swing in the entire personal branding space. But I remember buying that book and getting my first print copies. I ordered 50 of them and I got them shipped to my place, and I opened it up and I was like, man, this is exciting. But then as I read the book, I realized that it could be so much better. Now, at the time, I didn't have any of my frameworks developed. I didn't have my philosophy of personal branding created. I didn't have identity positioning created. And it was very early on. It was kind of preemptive for me to even publish a book, but I thought that it would be, number one, a good way to boost my credibility. Number two, to at least get my name out there. But if we compare the two, that first edition was only 6,500 words, 55 pages. And I kept rereading it, kind of like an artist, I suppose, who looks at a painting and thinks about, oh, I could have added a shade here. I could have taken this out. I could have made differences and changes here. And I know the podcast, has alchemy in the name. It's like what you're putting together to get an output. And so between reading the lines and trying to find value that wasn't there, I started working on the second edition. And it wasn't like I spent 3 years writing the book, but I had bursts of creative momentum. And I would come up with an idea on a bike ride. I would stop, pull over to the side of the road, pull out my phone, and take down some notes. And I would just jot any idea. And then at the beginning of 2024, I got serious about writing it, put all of the infrastructure in place, and really grateful to have it released in March of 2025 earlier this year. It was quite the undertaking. It's 10 times the length and 100 times the value.
Amazing. Well, you like skirted right by the whole process of this. So I want to
Yeah.
bring you back a little bit just because what I caught in all of that is, well, a couple things. You said 10 times the value, which it is. And you gave us a little nugget on the training that I was in the other night, but the piece that you said is I would be driving and I would pull over and I would just jot down some notes. And I find
Yeah.
myself doing that all the time. I mean, if I showed you the notes app, my notes app, you'd be
Hmm.
like, girl, you're crazy because you could scroll through for days on all the notes that I have in my notes app on my phone because I'll just be somewhere and something will hit. And, whether you want to call it spiritual or woo or whatever, we get these like downloads from our higher self, right? And it's just like a little whisper, and it's like, oh my gosh, I got to write this down. And I find myself doing that all the time. So I know for some of my folks listening, they're a little bit more because I live very much in two worlds. That's why I call it alchemy, right? Because it's a blend. I live very much in like the social work, therapeutic field, where we're always checking the boxes. And it's just like, okay, we got to get this framework done. We got to do this thing, use this method and all of that. And then I live over in this like coaching and just sort of spiritual energy world that's really just much wider and freer. And the blend of all that has been really amazing. And I find that a lot of people in my space are more of the cerebral and they're starting to learn how to listen to that inner guidance and learn how to listen to those things that come through for them. So I find that in you. I feel like you may have been in that space for a really long time. And that's why you have this amazing like manifesto that it's like thousands of words that you've been able to pull through. But how you got to this was through more of that energetic work and those downloads. So talk to my peeps about that and how you were able to step into that and say
Yeah.
like, man, what I have is something really special and let me listen to that. Like, how did you get to that place?
It's fascinating because you're asking me questions I've never been asked before.
I love it.
And you're also asking questions that are very timely in terms of some of my recent realizations and conversations that I've been having. Um, I'm normally a very logical person in terms of how I approach things. My work, I feel like we need to set the framework a little bit more into who I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
My name is Isaac Mashman. I run a personal brand consultancy called Mashman Consulting Group. I got started in this entire business endeavor in 2017. And over the past, I would say, yeah, 7, 8 years now, I went through a variety of different businesses from music management, network marketing, public relations, working in drop shipping and doing an apparel line. Like I went through all these different things, and that wasn't in chronological order. But in every single business that I was pursuing, I wouldn't say that I ever gave any of them my best effort. That was never the case. But I did realize that there was a reason why I wasn't giving them my best effort because I couldn't see clarity. I couldn't see a long-term path forward. And it's taken me years to finally find my business. I launched Mashman Consulting Group back in 2024. And then I did a soft launch, worked with some clients, and then I started writing my book, and then I went MIA and I had people asking if I died. And I was like, no, I'm in that like writing mode. And I'm like, I understand now why authors become alcoholics because it truly is
Yes.
a very draining process. And it's also something as a perfectionist and somebody who's naturally very OCD, I have a tendency of looking for the commas and the periods where there shouldn't be commas or periods and the spacing and the formatting. And it was a massive journey there. But I started developing my entire expertise in personal branding back when I was building my public relations firm. But at the core, it was still a consultancy. And I ran away from that title. But then I realized with enough people that I served and enough people coming to me for advice, whether that be friends or whether that be people and strangers on the internet, that I had something there. And then I kind of leaned into that entire idea of creating frameworks and methodologies and ideas that were my own, not just because I felt like I needed to, but because of the competitive edge that it would give me. And I realized that over the past 8 years, Aaron, I have been in this creative cycle to where I was creating more than I was building a business. And
Yeah.
now I'm getting into this next stage where it's like, okay, let me actually take all of these ideas and the IP and the proprietary strategies and actually build that business. And that's kind of where I am now. And when I was writing my book, I would definitely say that there was some, I would use the word intuitive thoughts and intuitive things happening because I'll reread this. And I've been going through it again because I feel like, whenever you're writing a nonfiction book, you need to be able to quote things from your book. You need to be able to understand the order in which it's written. I almost find myself asking, uh, how did I write this? Genuinely, how did I write this? And it was a transition point from looking for more value that wasn't on the pages, right? With the first edition. With the second edition, I've actually found myself wanting to expand on some of the different ideas. And sure, all of the work that went into it, I wanted to make it appear as if it was done through a traditional publisher. I wanted to reverse engineer and take, as you said, more of that cerebral approach and the more technical approach. But my book at its core is very philosophical and it's very emotional. And when you frame it from that light, you realize that personal branding is more than just social media dynamics and personal pages on the internet and how you appear in Google. Your personal brand is essentially you. And then from there, how you decide to position and market yourself, well, that's a strategy.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing all that and thanks for kind of walking us through where you were to how that's evolved to where you are now. And it is as a writer myself, I can say, I mean, I am in the midst of writing a book currently too. So I know,
Congratulations.
I mean, I've written one so far and here we are and it's like grueling, man. It's like I agree. I think it is there's a power that overtakes you and it can become very addicting. And then that process of getting it just right. And then as you're evolving in your own personal journey, you look back and you're like, wait, I want to tweak that, and it's just, it's really hard to balance all that. So I can appreciate what you went through in that process and just the evolution of self that took you through that, right? And so that's landed you though in this space now of re-identifying who you are in your own
Mhm.
personal brand. And so maybe you can share with us a tidbit or a piece, since you've been rereading it and kind of taking some pieces, maybe a piece of the book and share with us one of your favorite takeaways that you like to coach on or share with others that would be valuable to those that I work with or that are listening.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And there's a particular strategy. I actually wrote a paper on it last year before my book. It was kind of the intermission piece between the first edition and the second edition. And it was an academic paper called Identity Positioning, a macroscopic view on personal branding. And what identity positioning is a personal brand strategy that kind of reels you in and expands your thinking. And why I say it like that is a lot of times you look at how people position themselves online, you have all of these coaches, these professionals, these entrepreneurs, and they only talk about what they can do for the person, for their audience, right? And they never talk about who they actually are. But if we think about the phrase personal brand, and we have the word personal on the left and then brand on the right, and you draw a line down the middle, on the right you have brand. And that is all of the ways that you can make money, that you can provide value to somebody, your professional career and the professional, accolades and aspects. And then on the left side, with personal, you have all of the unique personality traits about you, your quirks, your characteristics, your height, your physical appearance, your flaws, and all of the things that we tend to run away from because we feel like it will change how we are perceived online. And I think that more people need to share those personal aspects, not in a way of sharing what you're having for dinner and necessarily treating it as, my mom used to say growing up, like the Facebook mom who used to post like the where they're having brunch and the mimosas and all that stuff. Like, okay, there's a time and a place, but more so, are you a mom, right? Are you a mother of beautiful children? What do you enjoy doing? Prior to this call, we were talking about how you like going camping and then some of the similarities and how I used to go and I went to a trip up in New York and all these different things, right? But that personal conversation creates rapport and that rapport is trust. And when you have trust with somebody else, you're connected with them not just for what they can do for you, but with who they are. And
Mm.
that is at the core of what identity positioning is. And so I would say introducing a personal hook with your professional punchline. So my own is addicted to coffee, right? I have a cup of coffee over there that I chugged prior to the interview, right? And I have addicted to coffee. And then the professional punchline is I help emerging and established public figures optimize, position, and scale their personal brands. But that addicted to coffee aspect, for being as simple as it is a way to show that I'm a real human.
Yeah.
And that trust, and I wouldn't even say trust is the starting point, connection is the starting point. And through familiarity, and the more times somebody sees me, they're going to associate coffee with me and therefore build that relationship.
I love it. That's such that's That's a nugget you dropped to inside the speaker group a little bit. You went a little bit deeper today, which is great because I remember I have it written down. I was just looking at my notes because there's some things I wanted to bring up from that meeting. And the first thing I have written is who are you? And that
Mm-hmm.
was something you spoke to us like, really, who are you? That's that personal side. And then that brand, it's not necessarily completely separate, right? And this is where I love how this connection for us in the alchemy, right? You're blending that. You're blending your personality and the brand. Um, and I think the piece that I really have enjoyed listening to you from the previous when we met in Jesse's group is you gave us some ways to do that. You gave us some ways to tap into navigating who we are and how to really discover that and connect with people. Um, I think you called it like you may have said this just now too, identity positioning. Is
Yep.
that the piece that you
Identity positioning, yeah, and that's the entire. I included the essay in my book as well. It takes up about 25 pages of the book, but it's like 9 pages if you're just read it on like Figshare. I have it on a couple different academic sites. But it is definitely a proprietary personal brand strategy. But if you think about the name identity positioning, you're positioning your identity, right? Yeah, because a lot of times, again, who are you? And that's something now that I've published my book, I found myself asking earlier this year because I published my book and I was like, okay, I've done this great feat. And it's 376 pages, it's 65,000 words. It became a bestseller in PR on Amazon. I had both versions of the book charting as the new release in the same category. And I'm like, okay, this is something significant. I need to, number one, take a step back and appreciate this because I have that tendency to just overlook accomplishments. And from there, asking myself those deeper questions of, even what clothes do I want to wear, right? What facial hair, right? And I'm over here clean shaven looking like a baby. And I'm asking myself now, it's like, okay, am I going to be that public speaker who has facial hair on stage? Do I want to wear a hoodie? Do I want to wear a suit? What color suit do I want to wear? Do I want it to have stripes? And these are different questions that are not just about the marketability and the branding aspect, but also the identity aspect of, okay, if you're somebody who likes a certain kind of music, are you incorporating that genre of music into your audio branding and how you're marketing yourself online? So there's a lot of nuance here that really ties back to who you are as an individual and the things that you choose to share or refrain from sharing from your personal life.
amazing. I'm just soaking that in for a second because I think the toughest part, right, is that as a business owner, that my brand is who I am, but also being able to separate that and
Mm-hmm.
noticing for myself that I'm worthy without the business.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all of who I am, but there's something so deep about pouring ourselves into that. And you've poured yourself into this work. Like you said, you took yourself away. You were like, I'm in this little cave writing my book, right? And then you come back out, emerge, like thinking the world stopped and it didn't. And it's like trying to fit back into it, right? And so tell us how you're able to do that. Tell us how, because I think this is something I know that my clients that I work with and my framework that I walk them through is holding on to their identity as just a human. And I work with
Mm-hmm.
primarily women, but a woman who is strong in who they are and being able to separate the business from that. But also that personal branding, it's all like you feel like, do I want to change it? Do I want to reinvent myself? Like there's a trickiness to it, right? And being able to have that looseness. So tell us a little bit how you've done that because you've written two now. So you basically re-identified yourself, right? Like you emerged into this like badass human of like, yeah, I wrote this little like 40-page book. Now I've written like almost 400. Like I am a totally wildly new human. And yet it has no bearing on just who you are as a person, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that as a writer, as an entrepreneur?
Well, it's interesting because I actually have, outside of the third edition, which will come out probably in 2027, it'll be much more academic in nature. And I have I have at least three other books on top of the third edition that I want to have out by 2030. Some of them are going to be co-authored with my business partner. And you were talking about something with being the business owner, right? Building a business and a company brand is entirely different than building your personal brand. There's a symbiosis that develops, but I know in the small business space, you don't see this in the corporate space or like larger businesses or cemented businesses, but a lot of small business owners, what they'll do is they'll use their company pages and speak in first person, and they'll almost view it as the same thing or have a personal page that reflects the business page, and it's like, no, these are two separate entities that you're developing. I'm Isaac Mashman. My company might be named after my last name, Mashman Consulting Group, but at the same time, I am building a corporate brand. I'm building a company brand that will be bigger than me, right? And that kind of, you have to take a step back and ask yourself, what are you trying to build? In my case, we're trying to build the number one personal brand consultancy by 2035, literally with dozens of consultants, proprietary IP, and be the consulting firm that really spearheads this entire movement forward because the personal branding space is a blue ocean opportunity. There's a lot of people talking about personal branding, but not many people are actually diving deep and setting trends and philosophies and principles for what this new school of thought really means. Now, to go back to your question regarding what you're talking about really is picking and choosing what you want to share, right? And I've been asked this question before in another speaking group, and it was, well, Isaac, what do I keep private and what do I share? And I talked about this in my book, and I also said essentially the same thing in the group. I said that you don't want to promote things that you don't want associated with yourself. So, for example, if you're a mother, right, and you're concerned for your children's privacy or maybe their own independence, that you don't want them to necessarily be that front-facing view with your own personal pages, you might not say mother of three in your marketing message. You might not use that as your personal hook. You would choose triathlete or adventurer or some other interest or passion or hobby that you have as your personal hook. So understanding, number one, what you want people to think of when they think of you, what you want people to see when they go to your pages, and then long term, different things that might be points of emotional leverage. And with emotional leverage, what I mean by that, I'm not trying to come across as manipulative, but certain aspects and certain interests or facts about you are going to build more rapport. For example, the mother piece, right? Because if you're helping women and you're helping them with their own identities and helping them, break out and overcome different, limiting beliefs, the fact that you're a mother who's also building a business is a piece of information that you probably want to share, right? And so you have to kind of pick and choose. And I'm not saying that you have to necessarily sacrifice a whole lot, but you do have to sacrifice your privacy at certain cases and certain situations. So a good starting point is I would sit down and write out, and I talked about this exercise in my book, I would come out with an entire list of characteristics, interests, passions, certifications, hobbies, everything about you that other friends, like your friend group, for example, will know you for. Are you the person who goes out to brunch and goes out to dinner and makes everybody laugh? Are you the quiet one? Are you the reserved one? Are you the witty one, right? And come out with an entire list of different information about you pertaining to the person. And then from that list, pick and choose what you would like to incorporate into your personal hook. And then the professional side is much easier because if you're building a business, you have something that you're providing in terms of value. And promoting the value piece is really easy. You can come across and say, I help women overcome limiting beliefs and X, Y, and Z, right? And the same way that I did my own, message. So I know that was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but again, it's very emotional, it's very nuanced. But again, I think that's why my work is so unique. And while, I'm really excited to just continue talking about it.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. I mean, I have in part of what I do in relationship building, specifically romantic relationships, because as a wife, as a mom, right, that is something that I have helped a lot of women entrepreneurs because that is a piece that's really difficult. Like as you
Mhm.
grow a business, maintaining your most sacred relationship as a significant other and as a mother, it can it can fray, right? And so being able to have a framework to be able to keep that together. And it's similar to what you just said. And it was like, wow, that's so fascinating. And yet so aligned that you're like writing out those pieces of who you are and kind of picking out those pieces that you do want to share. And I love that. And I don't know, I feel like maybe on some level I have done that, but that is such just a basic, simple, but not easy thing
Mhm.
to do is just sit down with yourself and say, like, yeah, who am I? Like all of the characteristics. And this is what I help women through too in the romantic partnership piece is like, what are the characteristics of who I am or what I want in a partner? And who do I have to be to energetically align, right? And that's sort of the same thing of like, who am I? And then who do I want to show up in the professional side and how to
Yeah.
align those? It's like very similar framework, but also emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's the thing. My book is if you go through and read it, you're going to realize that I start out with philosophy more than I do strategy. Like the book has strategy and I talk about reputation management, but it's also written chronologically. And so I start out with the educational piece, which is, what is personal branding? I go into the four pillar questions, what are you building or what are you trying to get from your personal brand? Money, vanity, mission. Who are you? And then, a couple other ones. I talk about the laws of personal branding, and it's not until chapter 4 that you actually get into branding and then marketing and then reputation management. But I feel like you have to start with the foundation, the philosophy first, because again, a lot of times when you think about personal brand, people are only talking about social media and Google search engine result pages and all of this other stuff, which is good. Don't get me wrong, but it misses the finer details, which is what makes you freaking unique. Because if you're just talking about the strategy and like, okay, how you're positioned as an expert, is there longevity in that? Because what if another person comes along and they're more interesting than you? What if another person comes along and they have more experience than you? They've been around longer, they've written more books. What will keep your audience connected and attracted to you compared to the next new shiny object, quote unquote, not to objectify them, but essentially that is why you have to build that emotional connection with your audience and with what you're doing. So there's security, essentially. We're really talking about security, and what you're talking about too when you're working with these moms and with these business owners and such, and what you've already talked about with me is I attached a significant portion of my identity to my book, right? And just like as a mother, I imagine, or as a father, you attach a significant portion of your identity to being a mother or to being a father. But then it's like, okay, what about the other side of you? What about these other interests? What about these other things? And so, how can you balance this identity with the other aspects of your identity, right? It's like, it's kind of like the person who, to use kind of a sarcastic example, they were the star football player in high school, and it's like they continue talking about how they threw a home run, a home run pass or, a touchdown 20 years ago. And it's like they attach their entire identity off of their previous success, but it's like, what are you doing moving forward? And understanding that everything about you is an aspect of your identity, not just one singular part, is a huge advantage in terms of marketability and how you position yourself.
Amazing. And how in your consulting, because obviously the book has a lot of nuggets in it. I mean, it's chocked full of um as you're saying your method, but also just information on how to implement some of these things. But um in working with you, right,
Mhm.
how can or walk us through what you do as somebody that maybe picks up your book and is like, wow, I need more. What are some of the things you do in your consulting firm?
Well, we have to start with the big question of what are you trying to do, right? And I touched on this earlier, money, mission, and vanity. And I believe that those are three of life's biggest motivators, and every other motivator kind of falls underneath those three. Do you want to make more money using your personal brand? Maybe charge a higher fee, grow your business, promote your business, land sponsorship deals. Do you want to do it for vanity just because you like the feeling, right? You like being on stage, you enjoy the followers, you enjoy the clout. And then we have mission, which is you want to spread something forward, right? Maybe you're interested in philanthropy, saving the animals, or maybe even you come from a traumatic upbringing and you want to talk to other people about how you overcame some of those challenges. And you can be motivated by a mixture of all three. You can be motivated for money, vanity, and mission. So I always start by asking my clients those questions. What are you trying to get here? And the second thing is, where are you trying to go? How big do you want to play this? And there's a hierarchy. You could be the international icon like Kim Kardashian or Donald Trump or Barack Obama or any of these massive celebrities or massive politicians. You could also be the local hero who is only known in your local city or your local area. And so we have to ask, whenever I'm working with a client, it's like, where do you want to go with this? And then we can talk about the strategy. What do you want to be known for? I talked about my book, but I'm not known primarily as being an author. I'm primarily known as being a businessman, right? And again, if I was to only talk about my book nonstop, 24/7, then I'm going to might as well be positioning myself as J.K. Rowling. And it's like, no, I'm an author full time. No, I'm not an author full time. It is a part of what I'm doing. And then once we have those foundational questions answered with our clients, then we can get talking about the strategy, right? Okay, how are you appearing online? Do you have an omnipresent personal brand? Are you everywhere, right? Okay, what is your marketing message? How are you appearing in terms of a seamless brand, right? Is there confusion and friction between how you're positioned on one platform versus the next? Where does your reputation stand, right? Are you perceived as an authority? Okay. If not, what are the steps that we can take to position you as an authority, whether that be getting into the press, launching a podcast, doing podcast interviews like I'm having with you right now. And so it's very detailed, very in depth, and very I would almost say invasive, right? Because I don't want to get the sugar-coated answer from my clients, and whether they're working with me or in the future my COO who I'm bringing on, or any other consultant, or even having a conversation with our AI consultant that we created. It's like we want to dive deeper on the person, because then once we have that stronger connection and understanding of who they are, almost like a therapist, now we can talk about solutions and strategies. And the strategy part is honestly the easiest aspect, because if it worked for one person, it probably worked for another, and then another and another, right? And so it's duplicatable.
Amazing. What a concept. I mean, who knew how deep you could get with your own personal branding, right? Like this is
Yeah.
just so cool. And as somebody who has reinvented, right, the name is so strong, and the mission behind what I'm doing is so powerful, but the reinvention at each new season of my life has really
Mhm.
evolved, right? Over time. And I'm sure that's what you're seeing in your own company, in your own business. But that foundation is there. And it's really cool to see. I haven't thought about these things, you know? I mean, I have, but not in this depth, and really sitting here taking it all in from you. I'm learning right now.
Mhm.
Like I'm sitting here in real time,
Yeah.
like, man, I need to sit here and work with you, and I need to be asked these questions and walk through it, because as a therapist, I can go deep with people inside their trauma,
Yeah.
inside maybe some of the things they're working through subconsciously, but personal brand is a part of that.
Yeah.
Re-identifying yourself, right? Like that's
Well,
just huge.
let me share a story from a recent client consultation I did, and his name is Isaac J. Hall, and you can follow him everywhere on social media. And he's a remarkable man. He's a pro bodybuilder, but more importantly, he's a veteran and he's a health advocate. I remember our first phone call where I was getting to know him, and I was asking him, what are you trying to do? And he's like, well, I want to help more people get healthy. And I asked him, I said, Isaac, why? Like, why? Okay, it's important. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, why? Like, don't give me the sugar-coated answer. Like, dive deeper here. And he's like, well, when I was younger, I lost my grandmother at an early age because of a heart attack, and he had another person in his family, and then another. And I said, okay, that's the pain. That pain is leverage. That pain is connection. And I remember being on another conversation in another mastermind, and there was a woman in there who was an artist and a creative, and she was talking about how she wanted to help other people essentially be open to sharing their creative juices, right? And leaning into that creative side of them. And I said, why? Tasha, why? And she's like, it's something I care about. And I was like, no. I was like, no. I imagine that somewhere along the line in your own personal life, you suppressed that creative side of you. Am I wrong? She's like, no. And then her voice got a little choked up. And I imagine it's very similar to where if I didn't pursue business and I didn't pursue marketing or public relations or anything, I probably would have gotten involved with psychology, because it's deeply fascinating to me, because those deeper conversations, even like your limiting beliefs or how you were raised as a child, the nature versus nurture conversation, so many different aspects here. And I believe that all of those things can be leveraged for a positive result, whether that be revenue, whether that be more impact, whether that be more influence, or whether that be easier influence. And by easier influence, I mean if you have a strong story, that story is going to spread like wildfire. I remember seeing Les Brown speak, And this was years ago now in Vegas at a company conference. And Les Brown started by sharing his story about how he used to stutter. And now Les Brown is known as one of the best public speakers of all time. He took his pain, used it as his advantage, and a great story, and built something amazing with it. And personal branding is not just about the strategy. The strategy's fun, don't get me wrong, but personal branding is more about the person, right? And understanding who they are and then how their unique selling points and their individual characteristics can really help them stand apart.
Oh, good. Yeah. And I love that we met inside. It ties back to that the speaker group and just finding your story or multiple stories and stepping into that and owning it and finding the positive, finding the pain and taking that and branding that, which is
Yeah.
what you walk people through almost in a therapeutic way, like I
Yeah.
like I do with folks, right? And so that's so cool. Yeah, the human brain and body is just so fascinating to me, and that's why I went the psychology route. But I think from an entrepreneur spirit, and I've always been pulled in that direction. I've always
Hmm.
been kind of a rule breaker and somebody that's like, what if? I mean, and then I shrink myself back. Then I'm like, but what if? And so I love that we're sort of in wildly different spaces, but yet in the same space of
Yeah.
like, how can I do this different and how can we do it better and helping people find their way through that. So, so cool. So amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. If somebody does want to work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best way would be going to mashmancg.com. That's the company website. Or if you would like to personally work with me, you could just follow me on social media and send me a message there. I have to practice what I preach, so you can find me everywhere at Isaac Mashman. Very easy. Go to Google, type in my name, and I'll pop up, right? Can't be somebody who talks about something and doesn't implement it. So, yeah, and Aaron, I've really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today, and you've enabled me to dive into certain areas and certain subjects pertaining to my own work that I haven't even viewed in the same light. So it's been good.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I want to continue to, just root for each other and share each other's stories. I think we definitely can support each other. This is a good example of just the crossover of like you meet somebody,
Mhm.
you're inspired by them. I was very intrigued by certain things that you said. I wrote it down, but something around like doing small things and wondering why we're not getting big results or something like that you had said. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
well, people get too big to do the small things and they wonder why they don't have the big results.
yeah.
That was the quote. Yeah, and I
Yes.
remember afterwards I spoke with Jesse and I was like, because Jesse Cruz, I've known him for years now, and being the speaker coach he is, and being another public speaker, because I do public speaking, I asked him, I was like, Jesse, what would you rate the session? I was asking him for feedback at the very end after everybody left, and he's like, well, that quote that you said at the end, that should have been one of the earliest things that you said. And I was like, wow, okay, that was
Like
just something that
drop. Yeah.
I threw out there. Yeah. But this goes down to how technical you can be, because what I did years ago is I sat down and wrote out a list of like 50 original quotes. I ran searches to make sure they weren't used anywhere, and I took those quotes, got them on Goodreads, got them on different quotes websites, and all this other stuff. And people get too big to do the small things, and they wonder why they don't have big results. Is one of those original quotes that I just pulled from. So again, when you're building your personal brand, you're creating this entire collection of IP. You're creating this entire collection of content that you could pull from at any time, that you could promote at any time, that you can continue to re-promote and repost. And I believe it's a lot of fun because I like to gamify it, right? I like to gamify it for the dopamine, whether that be increasing the followers, increasing the influence, increasing the connection, increasing the impact. But it's at a certain point, it becomes something that you see the fruits of your labor paying off because you have more conversations with other remarkable people. And I'm grateful to say that I'm kind of at that point now and continuing to scale.
Amazing. I love it. Yeah, that is such a good quote. And I've heard it said in different ways probably before, but it hit. And I think it hit everybody in that room that night. I was just like, oh, that was definitely, you got to remember that what are the fun foundational things that have
Yeah.
gotten you here and what got you here won't necessarily get you to that next level, but remembering what those little things are and just kind of reinventing that at each level. And it's just that was huge. That was a big game changer for me, so I appreciate that and thank you for that. So finding you everywhere on social. Where do you hang out most, though? Is there a specific platform that you hang out?
Facebook is where I spend most of my time, and ironically, Threads is also a platform that is a little bit of a hidden gem right now in terms of community engagement. My client that I was telling you about, Isaac, I connected with him on Threads, and it's Facebook's competitor to Twitter, but Twitter becomes so politically driven and just I don't like Twitter as nearly as much as I used to. But Threads and Facebook are where I'm primarily at right now. But I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn. But if you send me a message on LinkedIn, I will not see it and I will not reply. But if you want to get in touch with me, Facebook, definitely.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I haven't played around in the threads that much. I dabble in it here and there, but I've heard you're like the fifth person that's like, I'm kind of enjoying it over there. And I'm like, all
Yeah,
right, Aaron, maybe you should
you
pop in
should.
there and just play around. But yeah, I think Facebook, it's interesting. I don't know if it's a generational thing or what, but I find most of my people like to
Yeah.
hang on the Facebook. So on the book face, if you will. So yeah, it's a fun place to just I feel like I can kind of post whatever over there. So
Mm.
I learned Instagram. I have fun over there too with reels and things, but I always come back to Facebook. It's just good.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about one more tactical piece of advice because I feel like a lot of what we talked about there is strategy involved, but it also had a lot more emotional depth. But in terms of tactical advice, once you create content, you've gotten the hardest part out of the way. Creating content is the thing that takes the most time. It takes the most creative energy. But once you have that piece of content, it would be a disservice if you didn't promote it and get the most out of that content, right? Just ask the question there, rhetorical. So what I would recommend you do is anytime you're taking a short video, you have it edited, whether that be through AI or just a native video that you're posting, don't just post it on Facebook. Post it on TikTok, post it on Instagram, post it on Threads, post it on LinkedIn, post it everywhere, right? Because if you create the content that takes the most time, it's the hardest to do, take the most out of that, promote it everywhere. And that's also how you can have more security in your personal brand. Because imagine if the primary platform that you built your audience on disappears tomorrow. All of a sudden, your reputation, your audience, and everything's up in the air, right? Outside of the fact that you might have an email list. So that would just be a piece of advice that I would give and that I would share. And that helps you create more of an omnipresent personal brand.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm learning how to do that too, and doing it in different ways in
Mhm.
like kind of rotation. I think has been a key element in just getting more engagement, right?
Yeah.
Getting the people that really are truly aligned with you to connect, right? The algorithms of sorts can can kind of throw things off, but when you're in your zone of genius and you're putting it out there, people will find you. So,
Yeah.
great point. Well, thank you for that. I always like to end with this question. So, I want to thank you for your time and really have enjoyed talking to you. And I know this is not going to be the last time we connect, but um, if there was one little nugget, you've kind of already done some mic drops, but one little mic drop for this interview, and you want to leave my peeps with something, what would it be?
Mm. In Napoleon Hill's work, he talks about the master key of success. You have Charles Haanel, who did the master key system. You have these new thought leaders who always referred to like the biggest piece of advice as the master key. If I could create and I could promote and say the one master key for personal branding, it boils down to positioning. And I would say that if you are not positioning yourself as a public figure, you should give up.
Mm.
That is the truth. In order to cut through the noise, in order to cut through the competitive landscape, in order to stand out, you have to position yourself as a public figure, as an authority figure, as somebody who's credible, as somebody who's a problem solver, as somebody who has a story. Whatever that might look like for you, whether you're a lawyer, a stand up comedian, a creator, a mom who does arts and crafts, you should be the very best at that. And you should position that and make sure that you are being perceived as a public figure and doing things that are building your credibility, which credibility is public trust, and putting you in a position of authority, which means that you are now somebody that people will naturally look to because you are in a higher status than them. Not higher status in terms of human rights, higher status in terms of perception, but you have to position yourself as a public figure if you want to exist and thrive in 2025. And I would dare say any point throughout history, you had to be positioned as somebody remarkable.
Mm. That is so true.
It's a tough pill to swallow, but it's the truth one.
Become the expert. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. We will end with that because that is what I think people will get choked up on and have to do a little dive in on their own personal
Yeah.
stuff and root through it. But guys, if you are looking to build your personal brand in any sort of capacity, I mean, I am starting to learn about you more, watching you grow. I'm watching you on Facebook, on social media, and seeing all the cool things you're doing and picking up your book. I'm utilizing it as a textbook myself, taking notes, kind of like, okay, what do you got to do, Erin, here? So this has been a beautiful conversation, the first of many. So I want to thank you and reach out to Isaac, guys, and start following him on social. So thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Alchemy Experience. If this episode lit something up inside you, go ahead and share it with someone who's ready to rise too. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with me online on all social media at the Alchemy Experience. Because transformation loves company, and together we all rise. And hey, don't just survive this week. Thrive like you frickin' mean it. Let's go let it up. Talk soon.